Okay, hello everyone. My name is Warren. I'm here to do a presentation for my Culture and Politics in Latin America class for university. Today we're going to be going over why art sometimes has the advantage over traditional textbooks when it comes to portraying historical events and just history as a whole, in my opinion. So in front of us we have traditional textbooks, and typically in a lot of history classes, there is a textbook given at the beginning of the semester. They tell you what we're going to be going over in each chapter, and then that'll be that. At the end of your 15 weeks, it'll be done, and you've learned what you've learned. Take a test, goodbye. Um, but when it comes to textbooks, we understand that the saying is the history is written by the victor, or in this case, those with the power, those who control the educational institutions, whoever it may be. But that is somebody who approves a textbook to be used in the curriculum and then taught to the students. But the issue I find with that is that textbooks typically only come with one point of view. Granted, they're reviewed and peer reviewed by many people holding PhDs in some sort of history, but nevertheless, it still comes from a singular point of view, although it may cover a plethora of topics about that historical event. But my argument as to why art can sometimes portray history a little bit better is because it challenges our presumed beliefs, like mine. And what we'll be using is the Mexican Revolution for this. So in the Mexican Revolution, long story short, without giving all the historical data behind it, is that the Mexican Revolution was started because it was the people were attempting to get free from a dictatorship. And so with that came militias and stuff, people to overthrow the government in a certain way and to fight for their freedoms. And so we'll take, for instance, my presumed belief that women didn't fight in this war necessarily. They may have supported it, they may have, been the logisticians behind it and stuff like that, but I wouldn't think, at least in the early 1900s, that they would be holding positions of power. But surprisingly enough, they did. In the middle picture, we have like a woman officer on the right. But if you don't know anything about like the military or maybe military history, it may be unknown to you that typically the officers have the swords. In the beginning, I thought maybe the man would have had the power in this, but it doesn't turn out to be that way, at least in this picture, that the woman has the sword and is likely in charge of the man. But also on the far right, we have the Las Abuelitas, which were the women fighters in the Mexican Revolution. Now, not all of them were necessarily on the front line and they all fought and whatever, but many of them were. And many of them were actually holding positions of power too, such as colonels and generals, which to my surprise, that actually happened. Anyways, we will close off this presentation by talking about the movie Like Water for Chocolate and why that movie itself represented the Mexican Revolution within a very closed and niche setting. So if you haven't seen Like Water for Chocolate, it takes place on a ranch in which it symbolizes Mexico. At least what we discussed in class, this was the symbolization of this movie, is that the ranch symbolized Mexico as a whole. There were three daughters, the oldest one Rosaura, the middle one Gertrudis, and the youngest one Tita. Tita had some sort of a love affair with another man from another family, somewhat like a forbidden love type of thing. Anyways, the mother of these three daughters was playing the dictator, so to speak, of Mexico within this confined ranch. And her rule was that the youngest daughter, Tita, would have to take care of the mother as they got older, so she forbid Tita from getting with this younger man and instead married off the oldest daughter to the man, which obviously made the family dynamic incredibly broken, and a lot of jealousy and anger and hatred eventually ensued. And then eventually the middle daughter, Gertrudis, she embodies some sort of a revolutionary because in a spur of a moment she was eating food that Tita made, which was really good, and it inspired her to essentially become a revolutionary. But before that, she rebelled, she ran off, became a prostitute, and then eventually returned as a general of the Revolutionary Army, symbolizing the revolution. Tita, in a way, did the same thing by disobeying her mother and not listening to her and kind of rebelled towards the end. And Rosaura embodied the people who just kind of molded in a way and accepted everything how it was and just kind of went with all the rules-based actions, which many civilians might have done within the Mexican Revolution. So, to bring it all the way back to Michel Foucault's discursive formation theory, Michel Foucault is a French historian, but the power is constituted through accepted forms of knowledge, which is reinforced by education, the media, and political and economic ideologies. So, accepted forms of knowledge being that, in my case, oh, women didn't fight on the front lines or whatever. And that was proved wrong. But that was reinforced by education. Let's say if I read a history book and it may have been overseen, right? It may not have been a detail that was explained within that particular section, and it may have been left on the wayside, and I would have not gotten that, and therefore the history, the accurate history of it, would have been removed from myself and my knowledge. But in Like Water for Chocolate, the accepted form of knowledge and the way things are is by Tita's mother, which would be the dictator, and to say that the family tradition of the youngest taking care of the oldest is the way that it's supposed to be and will ever be. But yet, in this movie, she rebelled and then she got away from it. And the movie ends in a kind of a weird way, but ultimately those were the themes of rebellion and why it relates to the Mexican Revolution. And this concludes my presentation as to why I think sometimes art can be better than a traditional textbook in the form of portraying history and how things may have actually went down, or at the very least show you details that you may not have otherwise seen within a textbook. Thank you very much.